So they say the best camera is the one you have on you. So how much do you give up when you only have a cell phone? So today we're gonna compare the brand new full frame mirrorless Sony A7 III versus the Samsung Galaxy S9. What's up everybody, I'm the Everyday Dad. If I can figure it out, you can figure it out. Cell phones have killed the low-end camera market for good. There's no coming back, it is basically gone. But the mid-range and high-end cameras, they're going strong, with new technical marvels being released all of the time. But if you don't bring it, I mean, it's so heavy. Ugh. But if you don't bring it because it's so heavy, how much does it actually help? So today we're gonna compare two high-end devices in their own right, a high-end cell phone and a high-end mirrorless camera, and just kind of see, yes, the mirrorless camera will probably do better in just about every camera-related function, but how much are you actually giving up by only using your cell phone? I'm not a professional videographer, I only make family videos and YouTube videos, so that is where all of my priorities are when it comes to video. So we're gonna break this comparison down into 5 major parts: image quality, autofocus and autofocus speed, ease of use, stabilization, and workflow. Because the workflow might be the one that's a little different, because normally when I review a camera, it's against another camera, but we'll talk about workflow in a second. So let's get started. First up, image quality. Both cameras can film in 4K. The Galaxy can do 4K at 60 frames per second, and the A7 III goes up to 30 frames per second. And yes, the Galaxy has a teeny tiny little sensor that Sony's sensor basically eats for breakfast. I mean, it's the sensor that eats other sensors. Also, the interchangeable lenses give you way more versatility. Now, I think both look pretty darn good. There is obviously more detail and less noise in the A7 III image, but the S9 is holding its own pretty well. Yes, the S9 does not have as much control over its depth of field. It is a deep depth of field, but it doesn't look too bad. Image quality goes to the actual camera. Number 2, autofocus. Both the Galaxy and the Sony have phase detection autofocus, which is currently the fastest, most accurate way for a camera to autofocus. Now, the Sony's does a really good job keeping me on focus whenever I'm facing it. It also does a good job of locking onto objects when switching between near and far. However, the Samsung has next level autofocus. I think it reads your mind to tell what you want in focus. It's before the object's even in the frame, it is in focus. And the autofocus almost never misses a beat. It's crazy, and I think that has to do with all the processing power inside of the phone versus the processing power inside of the camera. At the end of the day, both are incredibly useful. Ease of use. Now, this is kind of unfair because cell phones have gigantic clear touchscreens that let you both frame a shot and choose your settings within a few taps. The A7 III has made big strides in simplifying the normie semi-incomprehensible Sony menu system, and the touchscreen is only really useful for changing your focus. Neither camera has a front-facing screen, which makes them both a little more difficult to use as a solo video maker. For the actual camera function, the cell phone wins, but we'll talk more in workflow on which is easier to use after you've taken the video. Next up, one of my favorites, stabilization. Stabilization is on the scene in a big way. Stable footage is the best thing ever. Even better than sliced bread. Prove me wrong. Go ahead, prove me wrong. Both cameras do have built-in optical stabilization that helps both with taking photos and recording video, but neither really does that well handheld. They both work okay, not great. However, when it comes to cell phone stabilization, you can get a really cheap gimbal that is super small and still will only cost you like $100. I do think that gives the edge to the cell phone in stabilization. And last but certainly not least, workflow. Now, I don't mention workflow very often because in most cameras it all works the same. You pull out the SD card, insert it into computer, move it over, done. And while technically you can do this with the Galaxy S9, pulling out the SIM card each time is impractical. To get the footage over to my MacBook, I use a program called Smart Switch that pulls the images over. It works most of the time, but can turn into a huge hassle, especially when using Apple products. Now, talking about Apple products, the footage from the S9 has a weird problem where the internal profile when viewed on a Mac is wonky. There is a fix for this, and I will leave a link in the description for a video that will take you through that process, but it adds another layer of just hassle in getting the workflow and getting your images and videos from the phone to whatever your project is. So win for workflow definitely goes to the A7 III.
So what, right? So this was just a fun little video to make while we wait for my GH5 to get here this week. Then I can compare two legitimate video cameras against each other. So the A7 III obviously crushed the Galaxy. You have way more control over your low light performance, your background blur. You got all that stuff really in the big camera. But I think we all get really caught up in all the specs and the technical wizardry and all that stuff. Phones are amazing right now, and if you only have a phone, you're not really losing that much image quality. So phones are awesome. Thanks for watching.